My name's Matt Emery with Veloce Vexed. And yeah, here for another track guide at the Motorsport Aragon circuit. Bit of a new track to iRacing, so I doubt many drivers are too familiar with it. But let's get into the hot lap. So let's get into the hot lap guide then for the Aragon circuit in Spain. Now I wasn't too familiar with the circuit towards the start of the week, so a bit of learning to do for myself. But after putting in a couple of hours and learning all the braking points and the characteristics of the track, I feel pretty confident with this circuit now. Again, the same it might be for you as well. Quite a new circuit to iRacing and quite a tricky one to get the hang of, especially if you don't know where it goes and the corners, etc. So the lap really starts all the way back here for qualifying. You're obviously going to be wanting to open up the final corner as much as you can, and then you come flying onto the pit straight, over 250 kilometers an hour towards turn 1. So you see I'm using a lot of the curb on the outside here into the corner. Also a lot of brake markers on this track as well you can use. So that's something I find really useful, and then there'll be a few references that I'll point out throughout the track. But for turn 1, you want to make sure you're going to be using all of this green AstroTurf and the curb on the right hand side going into the corner, just to open it up as much as you can and make sure you can carry that speed through. You're looking to brake just after the 150 board, so you can see I start slamming on the brakes just after we cross this line here. Again, this is really useful. They actually have the white lines for the brake markers on the track. So that's really useful, something to look out for and something to use to your advantage as well. But yeah, slamming on the brakes just after the 150 meter board, using all of that curb on the entry, sorry. And then you're really aiming just to get your front left just into this little slot here, just obviously not touching this red thing here. I don't really know what to call it. It's not really a sausage curb. That red curb there. So yeah, getting into the apex, make sure you don't touch that as it will throw you completely off the circuit. But yeah, getting as close as you can to it and then just carrying the minimum speed. And again, back on the throttle as early as you can. Now you can use a lot of this exit curb as well. Don't want to go too far as you will get an off track, but it helps to carry that speed through turn 1. It does slightly compromise turn 2, but I found it's slightly quicker. So I would suggest trying to carry the speed and don't worry too much about opening up turn 2. As you'll see what I mean in a second. Yeah, back on the throttle then, and then what I did through turn 2 here, you see I'm over, pretty much nearly touching the grass through here. And it means you don't have to open the corner up as much. So you'll see I'm carrying the speed through turn 1, and then still quite tight and narrow to the apex at turn 2, and just carrying the speed through. Slight lift of the throttle, you can see there. 4th gear as well. And I'll just play that through for you at once. So not touching that red sausage curb. Into turn 2, and then you can let it drift really wide on the exit and make sure you carry that minimum speed through the apex of the corner. Track limits here aren't too bad. You can run it pretty much to the edge, all 4 wheels to the edge of this curb here. So you're sort of in line with this drain covering here. So it's, yeah, not too strict, which is quite nice. As a driver to work with, you can really push the limits. But yeah, carrying that minimum speed through turn 2, getting back on the full throttle, just halfway through the corner. And also it means you can open up the 3rd corner. Slight lift, slight dab of brake as well. And as I say, using all of the curb on the entry to the corner. So yeah, you can see I've got about 10% of brake just initially. Just a bit of dab with the brake pedal just to get the nose into the corner. And then you're getting back on the throttle as you turn in. Make sure you don't touch this sausage curb. I did it a couple of times in practice and it just completely unsettles the car. Obviously you're taking a bit of a shallower line, but it's not worth it. It will just throw you slightly wide and you'll lose time from it. So you're aiming just to get as close as you can. You can see my right front tyre is just about nearly touching the start of the sausage curb. Then get back on the throttle, carry as much speed through as you can. Not too much lock, just so if you have too much lock on, you're going to scrub speed off. So you see I'm just running it out as wide as I can, using all of the track, and that gets you back across for the start of the turn 4, which is more of a double apex left-hander. Flat out through here, and then braking quite late. You're braking just towards the start of this curb here. You want to be quite nicely in the middle over this apex, and then you're carrying that brake. You see this is quite a decent corner for trail braking if you wanted to try it. You see I'm holding the brake about 40% the whole way through the corner. Obviously don't want to unsettle the car too much. So you see braking, holding the brake, and what that does is means you can carry the speed through the corner while also steadily slowing the car down. Doesn't unsettle the car, as I said. And yeah, I think that's probably the best technique for this corner, rather than slamming the brakes on, because obviously you're turning when you're braking, and what that will do if you brake too much, you're going to lock up and go straight on. Yeah, so clipping this first apex here, and then running it out nice and wide to open up the corner, and then getting a decent exit here. Yeah, again, you want to aim just before the sausage curb, so just about where I am there. You can get slightly closer. This wasn't a perfect lap, but it was pretty close. And you see, just getting into the apex there, and then back on the throttle as early as you can. For the exit, now you've got a couple of choices here. It doesn't make too much of a difference for the exit. Obviously back on the throttle as much as you can. You saw the rear stepped out on me slightly. Obviously in a race you want to look after your tyres a bit more, but on a qualifying lap that's absolutely fine. And then you've got a couple of choices here. You can either open up the next corner and run a bit of a wider line into the next corner. I prefer just to cut this curve completely. I found it was slightly quicker. And then straight line it into the next braking zone. No, I'd say this is probably one of the trickiest braking zones on the track that I found in practice. Just as you're turning slightly while braking, and obviously you're loading up the lateral forces. So when you come onto the brakes, it's very easy to lock up, very easy to miss your braking point. And I found generally just brake earlier than you think. So if you expect to brake at a certain point, always brake slightly earlier, maybe 10 meters earlier, just to give yourself that extra breathing space. And actually on this hot lap that I did run slightly wide. That cost me half a tenth or so. But again, you've got these brake markers you can use. You're looking towards in the middle, the 150 for this corner. So just before the 50 and just after the 100 is perfectly fine. About 75 meters, and then you're on this curve again on the entry. Looking to open up the corner as much as you can. As I said, slightly missed the apex here, so you really want to be late apexing about here and then getting on the throttle. As I say, I missed it slightly on this lap, cost me maybe half a tenth, but not the end of the world. And then again, you can use all of the track on the exit, and you'll notice I'm running the curb all the way down to the next corner. Again, a very tricky chicane coming up downhill, another tricky braking zone, which is a bit of a theme on this circuit. But yeah, running it down the hill, you're braking again, just about 75 meters. As it's downhill, it's a bit more tricky. You have to brake slightly earlier. The track doesn't do you any favors here, really. Again, quite easy to lock up here as well. If you are struggling with front locking, obviously just make sure you move the brake bias, 0.5% to the rear, and that should help you around the circuit. Also gives you a bit more rear rotation as well. Obviously don't overdo it. But yeah, if you're struggling with front locking, then obviously move your brake bias to the rear slightly. Yeah, so braking about 75 meters again, just before the 50-meter board. Apexing quite early here again, getting quite close to this sausage curb. I actually found you can touch it if you want to. It does help slightly with rotation. You can see I slightly touched the this part of the curb there without going too high over it, and that helps with initial turning and throughout the corner as well. And this turn also opens up the next downhill left-hand hairpin. So it's very important you don't run too wide and carry too much speed into this corner. You see I'm opening it up for the next one, staying in the middle of the circuit, driving slightly to the right to open up the left-hander. And then you can cut quite a lot of this. Sorry, I moved out of your way. You can cut quite a lot of this curb here. You see I'm getting quite far across it. If you're feeling a bit more bold, you can try the green stuff. The reason I didn't here is if you cut it too much, you just compromise your exit slightly. But if you are struggling, then obviously turning a bit earlier, you can use that green stuff, no problem. You won't get an off track for it. So it's something you can do if you're struggling. But yeah, playing it through then, getting on the throttle. With this corner again, you can open up the steering quite a lot. So you'll notice here I'm getting on the throttle quite early, almost at the apex. And then using all of the circuit on the exit, the car obviously, when you get on the throttle, will run and it will drift slightly wide. But that's completely fine because what it does is just set up your next corner, which we'll go into in a second. But you see, I'm pretty much nearly all four wheels off the track again. Again, running this curve just to open up the next corner. And this is also quite a tricky one, especially on cold tyres. Just as you're going to get a lot of understeer when your tyres are cold. Quite a high speed corner, and you're sort of a very long radius corner, so you're sort of just holding on, just being patient with the car. Obviously best to lift before you get into the corner, so you still get a decent exit. So you see I'm just starting to lift at the end of this curb on the entry here. You'll notice with my throttle trace, I'm just starting to lift from about here. Just to open up this next corner, and then a bigger lift just before the apex as well. And then back on the throttle, run it out nice and wide, using all of the curb again. And for this corner, it's very tricky because you come into this blind sort of chicane, blind braking zone. You have this little crest which you can't really see too much of, and I'll show you what I mean from the cockpit. So from this angle, I mean, you're basically 150, 200 meters away from the corner, and you cannot see it at all. So what I found, using these white lines on the track, you're using them as a reference for your braking point. So pay big attention to obviously the signs up here, and also these painted white lines as well. So my reference for my braking zone was just after this first white line, which is the 150 meter board. So let's go back outside the car. But yeah, that's what you want to aim for. Again, as I said, a very blind braking zone, so very tricky to get right. And then again, just trailing in, holding the brake towards the apex, using the curb as well on the entry to the corner. You can brake slightly later than I did, so it's probably a good reference just after 150. It's quite a safe line, and then obviously what you're doing is making sure you carry the speed through the corner. A few times I found I was braking too late just because the references weren't quite there yet, and you go wide here and you actually get a slowdown. So always best to brake earlier and get a better exit rather than braking late, locking up and getting a slowdown. So that's something to bear in mind when you're doing your races and your laps here. Wouldn't suggest touching this curb here. I tried it a couple of times and it just unsettled the car too much. And obviously as the corner goes on, you want to get the car back over to the left and then for the next right-hander. You can see I touched it slightly, but I wouldn't go too much further than I did there. And then back on the throttle as early as you can. So I'll just play it through for you once more. Braking into the corner, then when you're at the apex, you're getting back on the throttle. Running out nice and wide, and get it back across to the left-hand side just to open up this next right-hander. And you can get it's very generous with the track limits on this circuit, so you can get right over this curb here, as I'm doing. You can use all that green tarmac. As long as you've got a wheel on the curb, you should be okay. And then back on the throttle, using all of the track on the exit, nearly completely off the track again. Well, technically all the way off the track. But as long as you've got some sort of your part of your car on this curb, it's all okay. And that leads into the next braking zone as well. Now just going back to this corner, so you will feel the car, or you may feel the car get slightly light and loose on the rear. So you'll see, just if you pay attention to my steering and my throttle trace, you can see I'm just fighting the car ever so slightly. So that's something to look out for. Obviously, don't get on the throttle too early, as the rear will really step out. So that's something to bear in mind for that particular corner. Quite a high-speed corner, so obviously the rear is going to step out on you sometimes. Now coming into another very tricky braking zone. Obviously off the back of those last couple of chicanes. You're braking. This one's pretty tricky for your references. You're sort of braking before you get to this white line on the track here. So I'll play it from the cockpit angle. You're starting to brake just as you start seeing these cones. It's hard to get a reference really, but you're looking about 80 meters before the corner. Just so you don't overshoot the corner. And obviously this another tricky chicane, which opens up the big long straight, which we'll come on to in a second. Again, you'll notice I'm using all of the track on the entry just to open up the corner. And you can touch these cones. You won't get off track for that. I didn't on this occasion, but you will be hitting those cones, I'm sure, quite a lot over the week. Yeah, getting it nice and slowed down into the corner. You see, I'm sort of aiming. I'm not opening up too much. I'm aiming towards the apex. Quite a late apex as well, because you want to get it as far right on the exit as you can to open up the next corner, which, as I said, opens up the big long straight. Wouldn't recommend touching this big sausage curb here. It's very high, and it doesn't settle the car, and it's just going to compromise your exit, and then obviously compromise the long straight. So don't touch that curb if you can avoid it. Get as close as you can to it as I did there, and then pull it back across to the right-hand side. And this corner is really all about the exit. So you compromise your entry. Obviously, you've got that big long straight. You really want to get a good run out of this corner, as it will cost you all the way down the straight otherwise. So see, I'm opening up as much as I can, getting it into the apex, and then on the throttle as early as you can. I can't stress this enough. It's so important. You'll notice before the corner, or before the apex, sorry, I'm getting back on the throttle. And you can use a lot of this track. It's quite a satisfying corner to get right, actually. You can use a lot of the entry curb and a lot of the exit curb. So see, look, I'm already 50% throttle before we're even at the apex. And then just being patient with the car, and then full beans out the corner. Not even at the exit curb yet. Yeah, really important to get this corner right, as it will cost you a lot of time if you don't. And I just played that for you in the cockpit angle. Not really too much references to use on the track here. Yeah, as I said, opening up the exit as much as you can as well. Don't go. I did find you can get an off track if you touch this part of the track. So I say this is your limit for your outside tyres. Don't go any further than that, as you will get an off track. But yeah, this is fine. Again, pretty much all four wheels off the track, but you won't get an off track for that, so that's absolutely fine. And yeah, and then you've got a bit of time to think about your next braking zone. Now, what I found was on a few good laps in practice, and it's very easy to overthink the next corner. So just make sure you keep your concentration. Very, very tight hairpin. I say this is the trickiest corner on the track to get right, just as it's so narrow and the braking zone is really tricky. So you're flying in here, 260 kilometers an hour. Your braking reference really is this 150-meter board here. You're braking just after that 150-meter board. If you brake too late, you're going to lock up and go straight on, and that will cost you a hell of a lot of time. In fact, there I braked just slightly before it. So if I go in the cockpit cam, you see, as it goes past your screen, as it goes past your field of view, you want to start braking. That's what I was doing. Obviously, it depends on your field of view. But for me, it was just before the 150-meter board. And such a hard braking zone to get right. So make sure you do practice it. You see, I'm pretty much, I slammed the brakes on at about 100% brake pressure for a split second, just to get that initial, stopping force into the brakes, into the tires. And then you're looking really to hold this curb as long as you can on the entry, just to open up the exit. It's all about the exit this corner as it sets up the final few corners of the lap. And you see full lock on the tires, on the steering, and also I'm braking quite heavily still into the apex, just to really get the front into the corner and sort of rotate the car on the apex of the corner. And then it doesn't really, the Porsche Cup car is obviously it's a heavy car. It doesn't do too well in slow speed corners, so it makes it even more difficult. So it can feel slightly clumsy at times. But as long as you get a decent exit and you make the apex, you'll be fine. So I'll play it through for you once more. So you're just getting it nice and rotated on the apex. Back on the throttle. The rear end steps out slightly on the exit, but there's not really too much you can do about that unless you want a short shift, but it does bog down slightly. But yeah, really make sure you practice this corner in your practice sessions, as it's probably the trickiest on the circuit and so easy to get wrong. If you're looking at overtaking spots for this track, this could be one of them, but due to it being so narrow, it will be difficult. I'd maybe suggest setting someone up for the pit straight. You're really going to need to be alongside to make it work. Just as it's so easy to lock up and it's such a narrow corner, it's going to be very easy to get it wrong. But yeah, that's pretty much how you want to do it. It's one of the better runs I had. And then back into the throttle, getting it back over to the left as much as you can. You see I'm in the middle of the track here. Try and stay flat if you can. Colder tyres is quite tricky. You see I had a slight lift here over this apex. And what I would say is don't compromise, do compromise the next corner. You want to carry as much speed as you can while you're accelerating here. So you see I'm running it out quite nice and wide, which does slightly compromise the final corner, but it's completely flat anyway. So you don't need to worry about that. Please notice running out as far as you can, slight lift on the apex. Final corner is not really too much of a corner. Obviously, just making sure you're not touching this curb here, or this slight sausage curb. But yeah, once you pass your final corner, that completes a lap of the Aragon circuit. Yeah, as I said, a bit of a new one for most people. So yeah, do make sure you get your practice in for this week. So that was the hot lap guide for this week's Porsche Cup week 7 at the Aragon circuit. I hope that was really useful, and there were a few tips and tricks you learned in there. Obviously, a bit of a new track for everyone. So yeah, gonna be wanting to get your practice in. Yeah, make sure you check out coachdavacademy.com. Also, the helpful Discord channels. There's lots more setups to explore and data packs to really help you find those temps and those seconds. But yeah, I've been Matt Emery, and this was the Porsche Cup car for week 7, and I will see you next week. Take care.